Welcome to our third party of our presentation concerning research and the Research for Academic Award. This is your presenter, Bituro Pascari Kazeri. In this part, we are going to cover the aspect of research that is called literature review. As sociologists, we are trained not to take things for granted, always to go beyond what an ordinary person sees. And we are trained to think like researchers and before that to think like a sociologist. Now, because we don't take things for granted, let's see if that's true or we live by those words. That's we don't take things for granted. Literature review. What does actually mean by the literature review? In the literature review, we've got two words, literature and the review. So what is literature? Literature is any written document. Any written document is a literature. And when we say review, is the process of assessing any written document, okay, in order to see what is there and see the possibility of making any change where it is necessary or making any improvement where it is necessary. So this is where it is very important in order to take those words by our literature review, what are you going actually to review. So when we say you review any written work, okay, and by review, you actually going to make an assessment in order either to improve it or make any change upon what you have assessed. Now, in the context of research, we have a specific area of a research proposal or a research report where one is required to record the literature review he conducted, or he or she conducted. And what does that entail? In the research context, when we say literature review, we are actually referring to two areas, the empirical review and the theoretical review. And this is the process of searching for written work that are based on the empirical studies and the theoretical studies which are related to the topic, to the area or aspect you want to research on. So, if your research is on the elderly, okay, or the elderly population, then your review should be focused on previous studies which ended up producing reports which are now can be categorized as a written work. And here is where we get the difference between the review that was covered in the first part of the background of the study. In the background of the study, it's normally limited to literatures which are not empirical. So that they are not a result of or the proceedings of the scientific study. Like, that's where we at the background we said you could use newspaper reports, blogs, social networks, social network discussion and the public discourses. But in there are very little scientific based informations. But in the literature review, you see, it focuses on the proceedings from scientific studies, which ended up with a report, which in the course of our definition, the prior definition, in the context of what we are presenting today, is that is a written work. But it's a written work based on their scientific generated informations, which has got evidence, and it's a process of scientific method. So that is the first part. The first part of literature review focuses on study report generated by scientific method in the scientific process. So what do you do? And on the other part, we have got empirical, theoretical review. This review the theories which are related or could help you to understand better and describe better and capture better the social phenomena that you want to study, that others have used it in the previous studies, that you wanted to improve upon it. So you could say, for example, there is a study which was conducted to try to understand why people adapt to climate change. So we normally, what pushes people to, that is a motivation, okay? So then we go, what motivates people to, there are specific theories which deal with motivational issues. So you could see in the review, normally they are all in the same package, but for a person, for an individual who think like a researcher and who think like a sociologist or a social scientist, in the same package you will know differently. This is theory and this is empirical evidence. Now, what do you do when you get a research work? You get a literature which is purely based on a scientific process, a scientific method, which ended up with a report, whether it's a monograph, or a research paper, okay, or a research article, a research-based article. Then when you review it, what do you do? What are you looking for? I think normally we search for a number of things. One, normally we'll be interested with the title and the person who did the author. Author, year of publication, and the title. This is very important because for the case of referencing, because you have to know who did it, when did he do it, and what was the title. And that is very simple, very basic, but very important. Then another aspect of empirical review is the methodology. So in the methodology, it's very important to know what was the research design. Was it quantitative or qualitative? Was it inductive or deductive? Was it explorative, explanative, or descriptive? And then you also look for the setting. Where was the study conducted? Was it in Tanzania? Or any part of Tanzania, Africa, or where was it conducted? And that is very important because it's going to be very useful when you try to gauge out, to find out the gap in knowledge. Okay. And then the other the methodology which was used. How was the data collected? The preparation of the study, the sampling process, the sample size, okay, and what was actually the objective, the research, the main objective, the specific objective, and the subsequent research questions which were guiding the study. And then the methodology, as the way of said area, where was it conducted, how was it conducted, the preparation of the study, the sample size, the sample process, the data analysis, and how it was presented. And then you will also try to find what was the findings of the study against the objectives, how did the findings answer the research question towards answering the research specific objective and towards answering or meeting the requirement of the research objective, the main objective. So those findings normally in many studies, scientific studies, they saw the limitations and how did the challenge they faced during the data collections and the whole research process, and how did they limit, they compromise the actual intention, whether it was made 100%, 75%, or 65%, or whatever. Then normally there are recommendations, and one of the recommendations which is highly promoted is the area where the future researchers should focus on. So this is the whole process, takes you through the literature review on the side of empirical review. Then on the theoretical review, you review the theory. You find in the research report or any research written work, any written work based on the research process and the research findings, there are normally the theory side of it. So you review that theory, whether it was adequate to describe the area, the aspect which was studied, which you are also going to study, to adapt, to enrich, to expand the knowledge. Was it enough? Or the theory which was applied 22 years ago or 3 years ago, does it adequately fits in the situation today? And we know theories is a tool which can help us understand us to capture and help us to capture and understand a social phenomena better. And normally social phenomena exist in the context. So, and the review means you review something which was done previously, not in the present time, but in the past time. So what is actually happening now in relation to the past, whether you ask yourself whether that theory which was used 2 years ago is still adequately for analyzing, understanding, and describing the situation, the current situation. And that's why we said at the beginning of our presentation, that's the literature, you go to written work. And for the sake of the literature review, you don't review newspapers when you are doing the literature review, because there is no scientific in that. You don't review a fiction book because there is no scientific in it, okay? You review scientific, you review written work, which are the proceeds of scientific process. But in it, you see things that make it scientific. Now, after reviewing the existing literature, which is related to the work you are proposing to do, and after reviewing the theories which were used, then now you have the very important part that we said, remember when we were defining the word review. Review is the process of assessing what is existing in order to see if it is necessary to make any improvement or to make any change. So if you see that it is necessary to make an improvement, or if you see there is a need to make a change, then you have actually identified the gap in knowledge. So, and that gap in knowledge comes when you study looking critically on the previous empirical literature and the previous applied theory. So you add your voice by criticizing the shortcomings, and those shortcomings could be related to the situation, or it might have overlooked some aspects. But there are obvious one aspect which was not there, the present situation. So normally, any literature review should put in the voice of the reviewer. What does the reviewer think based on what he has reviewed, empirically, the empirical aspect and the theoretical aspect. Then he puts in voices, and on top of his voice, after identifying the gaps, he shows to the reader that based on the review, I've seen these gaps, and my intention is to fill the identified gap. So normally, what is the background in which the gaps could be? What the situation could lie with the gaps? What aspect? A gap could come from space. Okay? Suppose someone was conducting reason for divorce. The reason for physical physical beating. The physical beating of partners in a marriage could not be a reason in among the couriers in Tanzania, because to them that sounds normal. But in the other areas, that could be a very serious problem and the cause of divorce. So the space, the context. So if someone conducted a research on the reason for divorce in the area where culturally beating a partner in marriage is not a serious issue, then he could not raise that issue. Okay? So you could see that cultural and the space could give you the base of creating or identifying a gap in knowledge. In the same way, let's say time. Another cause of gap of knowledge or base of gap in knowledge is time. Let's say someone who was conducting factors for divorce 50 years ago. He could not mention text message in that I found an abnormal, a very strange text message in my partner's phone, because there was no mobile phone at that time. So factors for divorce could not be a text message in 2024, in 2020 or 119 in the 50s. But it is possible now. If you go out and research the reason for divorce, people will tell you, I found a message in my partner's phone, which I think was very disturbing. So I said, okay, that was the reason of divorcing my partner in marriage. Another area where what could lead the rise of the gap of knowledge is the methodology, which is a research paradigm. Say, okay, someone uses quantitative, and you think the change from quantitative to qualitative could bring in more information than the one which was generated from the methodology, part of methodology what you used in the previous research. But so we see space, time, social changes and the cultural changes, and the methodology. Those could be the basis of the gap in knowledge, which you could identify and design to fill in order to expand knowledge on the existing literature. Now, having said that, let's recap it. We said literature review is a very important aspect of the research process. It is an important component in the research proposal and the research report. A literature review is actually a process of looking at written work resulting from the scientific process. It's a process which leads one to either keep it, but because there is dynamism, there are only two ways forward: improving upon it or changing it altogether where it is necessary. But I think it is necessary because the society is always in a dynamic move, variables are changing. So what was discovered during the situation 2 years ago is not necessary to remain the same today or in the future. So there is always the need for improving, or the need for expanding, the need for changing. And when you review, you have to put in your voice, you critically either support or challenges. And the challenges will always lead you to the gap of knowledge. Once you identify the gap of knowledge, then you create the base upon which you are going to set up your study, the current study you are proposing, in order to fill up the gap. But there is always, it's not going to be 100%. That's why in any written research work, there are recommendations, and one of the recommendations is the opening up, the indication where the researcher, the future researcher should go, and try to mitigate any shortcomings done by the previous researchers. So, having gone through that, that is end of our presentation, and I would like to ask you, please subscribe, share, and comment. Thank you for listening.